everyone, it's Susan Jones. Welcome back to my Sunday Spotlight. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about reading comprehension, specifically the strategy of retelling. So when we are getting our students to retell a story, what we're doing is we're getting them to kind of check in with their own understanding. Are they able to process and synthesize what has happened already in the story? Are they able to identify different story elements? Are they able to kind of pick out what's important and what's not important? There's a lot that goes into retelling. So today I wanted to go ahead and share 3 fun activities to have your students practice retelling in the classroom. Let's go. When teaching students about retelling, I always like to start with fairy tales. Most of your students are familiar with popular fairy tales like The Three Little Pigs, Goldilocks, The Gingerbread Man, and these are fun ways to get your students practicing retelling stories they've heard over and over and over. Now with fairy tale plays, first I will go ahead and pick a fairy tale and I'll probably read it aloud to them so they can listen to the story one more time. Then I have students actually color in the setting of the story, which is something we will talk about together. And once they have gone ahead and colored in that setting, I have them create their own little puppet, like this. Now to create these, all you have to do is print out some clip art of the main characters. So you can even have students help you brainstorm who the main characters are in the story and who you will need little puppets of. I'll go ahead and insert a picture here, but once your students go ahead and draw that setting and they've colored in their little puppets, and to do this, like I said, I print out clip art and I just put a little straw on the back of it so students can kind of walk through it. And then I usually have them work with a partner and they go ahead and retell the story in sequential order. That is something we always talk about, which is another reason I like those fairy tales, because telling the story in order is really the only way it makes sense. So it's a great way to have students have a little fun. They're identifying the setting and the main characters, and then they go ahead and they can retell the story with a partner. Once students understand what retelling is, I will go ahead and do a read aloud with different stories. And an activity I like to do after that is called retell squares. Now I will have students do this with a partner, and again it looks like this right here. I'll put a picture over on top of me, and with this picture it's just a bunch of different squares and students will take turns answering the questions in them until all the squares are colored in. So some of the questions will say who is the main character of the story, what happened at the beginning of the story, what happened in the middle of the story, what was the setting. It's basically a comprehension sheet, but it's a more fun way to kind of practice those different parts of retelling, and you can do it with a partner. Lastly, my favorite retelling strategy is one that I will use in whole group and small group, and it is called stop and sketch. Now listen, your younger learners might have a hard time listening to an entire story brand new for the first time and then retelling and remembering all those important pieces. So with stop and sketch, what it does is it really helps them kind of break apart the story into more manageable pieces. Now, a lot of times what happens with your young learners is when they are listening to an entire story and they have to go ahead and retell the whole thing, it might be a lot for them to understand at one time, especially if they've only heard it one time. So it might be hard for them to remember the most important parts of the beginning, middle, and end, or all the characters, or, the setting of the story. So I like to use stop and sketch. So the way it works is I will go ahead and read a story aloud. I can do this whole group or small group, it's up to you. And as you're reading the story, you will stop after the beginning part of the story. Or think about it as you're gonna break it up into 3 parts. So you'll have to determine when you want students to stop and sketch. And when you stop, you have students sketch what they believe are the most important parts of the story that you've read so far. This activity is such a great way to get students, first of all, breaking up the story into more manageable pieces, and then it's also a great way for you to see if they can really understand what's important and what's not so important. This is not only great for retelling, because you'll do this 3 different times, and then when they're done with the sheet, they'll go ahead and retell the story based on the pictures that they drew. And they can do this with a partner and see that we maybe didn't draw the same illustrations. We can talk about why one part we thought was more important than another part. But also this is really great for beginning of summarizing. That's something you probably won't cover till later in the year after your students are really good at retelling, but it's a great way for them to kind of understand that when you're summarizing, you're not going to say every little thing that happened. Even when we're retelling, I don't want students to mention every little tiny little detail. I want them to think about what was most important, what's really happening in the story. So your 3 retelling strategies are fairy tale plays, retell squares, and stop and sketch. And don't worry, lucky for you, I have all 3 of these. I know I showed you some images here. I have all of the printables that you will need, and you can actually collect them all by the link down below. Go ahead and insert your email. You will be emailed a PDF with everything listed in here, and you can try them in your classroom. Let me know down in the comments if you're excited about trying any of these different strategies and where you might use them in your class. If you enjoyed this video, please go ahead and give me a thumbs up so I know. Make sure you subscribe to my channel and click that bell. That way you're notified of every new week's video. I'll see you next Sunday. Bye. Once under students